Great. Okay, thanks, Eric. So as Eric said, my name is Keith Hambrecht. I'm the Restoration Program Manager for State Lands for the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. And I was asked to talk about Phragmites today. This is a presentation that I gave to the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council this fall with the help of my counterpart, Chad Cranney, who's a Wetland Manager and oversees Phragmites control for the Division of Wildlife Resources. Before I get into Phragmites, I just wanted to cover state sovereign lands first. So the Utah Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands is the management authority for state sovereign lands. And those sovereign lands are the beds of the navigable waterways of the state. They include Bear Lake, Bear River, Great Salt Lake, Jordan River, Utah Lake, and sections of the Green and Colorado River. It is 1.1 million acres of lake and riverbed, but most importantly, I think, is 22,000 miles of shoreline. So we have a lot of wetland and riparian area to manage. And in just the last couple of years, we've built a team of coordinators to help us do that. And so we now have coordinators spread out throughout the state on all these different water bodies to improve the shoreline condition. And one of the main things that we're working on is Phragmites. So now I'll move into invasive Phragmites. And here's a photo from the bed of Great Salt Lake in Farmington Bay. This is on the edge of Farmington Bay, WMA. This is 2003. After the floodwaters of the 80s had receded, you could see Farmington Bay is just a large salt flat, very little vegetation at all. Then 2008, so only 5 years later, there's approximately already 2,000 acres of Phragmites covering this area. And you can see that peak in the background referenced in each of these photos. So 2008, here's 2017. And so the pace at which Phragmites invaded the bed of Great Salt Lake is impressive. And here's what it actually looks like up close. So this is a photo of me and also Chad standing in Phragmites. Phragmites grows close to 20 feet tall. It has significantly impacted bird habitat and the bed of Great Salt Lake and wetlands throughout the watershed. And it also will significantly disrupt hydrology. So it traps sediment, blocks water flow onto the lake bed. And so in the last 10 plus years, there's been a significant effort by DNR for both Division of Wildlife Resources and Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. And we partnered with Utah State University to develop best practices to control Phragmites. And what that looks like is a two-phased approach. First, we do spraying, herbicide spray on Phragmites, followed by mowing. And the research found that we have to repeat those treatments for a minimum of 3 years in order to effectively control Phragmites. We repeat those treatments until we see 10% or less Phragmites cover, and then we move into our phase 2, which is maintenance and restoration. And so here's where we dial in our water control if we have the ability to control water, do a lot of revegetation, sometimes use grazing, and we try to prevent Phragmites from reinvading. So of all of the 10 to 15 years of effort and research that went into building these best practices, we've really boiled it down to this for our bottom line on effective control. We know that we have to use herbicide. We have to use systemic herbicides, but they have to be done at the right time. It has to be done at the end of the growing season because Phragmites is a perennial plant. It takes time for that herbicide to soak into the roots, and that happens at the end of the growing season. But we also know that drought negatively impacts the effectiveness of the herbicide. So that's competing in recent years with our treatments. These really, really dry years, sometimes we have to spray earlier. And then in order to effectively control any given patch of Phragmites, we know we have to treat it for 3 or more years. And that right time it really depends on the site. So some sites have more water, some seasons have more water. But really, what this led us to is that we really have to capitalize on wet periods. So we know that water makes our treatments more effective, and in wet periods, we really need to take advantage of that to do more Phragmites control. I also want to mention that we do use grazing as well. So grazing will not kill Phragmites, but it helps contain it. And so there's specific use cases where we do use grazing. In areas that don't have enough water for us to effectively treat Phragmites, we'll use cattle to open areas up, improve bird habitat, and control the seed source of Phragmites. Also, in areas where we've been successful in removing Phragmites, we'll use cattle grazing to help maintain those areas. So we have these best practices and we're implementing them on a really large scale in the watershed. So on Utah Lake, we've been treating the entire shoreline of Utah Lake. It's about 12,000 acres of wetlands. And then for Great Salt Lake, our project boundary is about 180,000 acres of wetlands. So it's a massive area. And DWR does all the control within the state-managed waterfowl management areas. Forestry Fire and State Lands is doing treatments on the lake bed. The Nature Conservancy has the large shorelands preserve on the edge of Farmington Bay. They're doing Phragmites control there. And then the Fish and Wildlife Service is doing Phragmites control at the Migratory Bird Refuge. So currently, almost all of the wetlands around Great Salt Lake that are managed are being treated for Phragmites. So we've come a long way to be able to reach that point where we're now treating that massive area. This just shows some of the growth and efforts at Farmington Bay WMA in 2007. The map on the left shows treatments that are done on Phragmites, and it's just a little bit on each end of the area. And then in recent years now, they're able to cover the entire area, both with ground and aerial treatments. And then also for Forestry, Fire, and State Lands in 2004, right after our big water year, we had a lot of water and a lot of funding, and we were able to do our largest treatment yet, which is 11,000 acres. And again, we had the funding and water to do that, which is really the recipe for success for us. In order to coordinate all of this on a really, really large scale, we've now implemented strategic planning. So this map shows all the different project areas we have around the lake where we have either already established strategic plans or have plans to put them in place. And what these strategic plans do is designate a project area adjacent to the upstream water manager so we can work in partnership with them. So for example, on the north end is the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge, and all of the lake bed below that refuge where their impoundments can control water is our project area for that strategic plan. And we coordinate our treatments and water control in those areas so we can allocate water and funding resources to be most successful. We're also significantly ramping up our revegetation efforts. So now we're looking at what are the best species to use, what's the best timing, what species work well for seeding versus planting. And we're also trying to bring in a lot of diversity. So we've been participating in the state's pollinator habitat program. This is really the focus of our efforts now is revegetation. And so we're doing all of these treatments. Are they working? For Utah Lake, because we're treating the entire shoreline of the lake, we actually have a complete data set. So we can have a good estimate of how much we've reduced Phragmites. And we updated our numbers from this season for 2005, and we've reduced Phragmites cover by 88%. So there was over 12,000 acres in its full coverage, and that was around 2010 to 2012. Now we're down below around 1,000 acres. And here's Phragmites, our percent reduction in Phragmites cover in the last 4 years. So we'd reached about 70% cover in 2020, and now we're all the way up close to 90% reduction in Phragmites cover. And what's exciting about that is that it also is supported from what we found on research for the seed bank. So this plot shows seed bank viability for Phragmites over time. And after about 3 years, the viability of the seed bank drops off significantly. And then after 5 years, only 1 to 8% of that seed bank will germinate. And so the initial research showed that our herbicide treatments needed to be repeated 3 years. Some of our field experience, we found it could take 5 years. And that also is working in concert with the seed bank, which is around that 3 to 5 year time frame. So we know if we keep up treatments in an area for 3 to 5 years, we can effectively control or kill a given patch of Phragmites and then also get ahead of the seed bank. And so that has proven to be the case on Utah Lake, where we're able to maintain those gains that we've seen. And now we have a really low Phragmites cover. On Great Salt Lake, we don't have a complete data set for all the treatments, so we can't give an overall percent reduction, but we do have some data. So with the Division of Wildlife Resources, they keep track of their ground treatments that they do each season, and they're able to estimate Phragmites cover in the areas where they're going and doing spot treatment. That it used to be almost full Phragmites cover, so 80+% Phragmites cover, and now year after year they're finding that their Phragmites cover is in the 10 to 15% range. So they're also able to maintain low Phragmites cover. So now I'm just bringing this photo up again. I'm going to go through a bunch of monitoring photos we have from around the lake just to show how these areas are transforming. So much of the lake bed and much of these wetlands used to look like this. Starting with some of the Division of Wildlife monitoring points. So here is a monitoring point from Teal Lake of Farmington Bay in 2017. This is an impounded pond. The photo from 2017, you can't see the pond from the photo point. 2018, you can see all the dead Phragmites where it's been removed and mowed down. And then in 2020, it's all open water again. And that's duckweed on an open water pond. Here's another area and photo point from Division of Wildlife. This is the Willard Spur. And that map just shows treatments that are happening out in the Willard Spur. And in 2015, this is where some research plots were for grazing. And that fence line that's in that top photo from 2015 is the fence line, same fence line in that bottom photo where there's vegetation running along it, which is cattails that are out there. But so that whole area has turned back into lake bed, both from removing Phragmites and then getting water out there again. So going back to the other original photo from the beginning, this is Farmington Bay in 2017. And this is a Forestry Fire and State Lands project. And here's what it looks like now. So 2021, that same area has open water and mixed vegetation. We have grasses and forbs coming back in. And then a few years later, we're still maintaining that mix of open water and low-lying desirable vegetation. Here's another project area on the lake bed outside of Howard Slough. After many years of treatment, we have 3-square bulrush and alkali bulrush dominating the area. And then we also have lots of open water, and bird use has significantly picked up in this area. This is the same project area, but further to the east. We have bulrushes, but in this area, a lot more low-lying forbs. We have rumic species and native buttercup species, open water. So all these areas are significantly transforming back into diverse wetlands. This is in Farmington Bay, outside of the Teal Lake impoundment. And that is a large patch of 3 square bulrush coming back, as well as open water. And in the corner of the picture there, you can see our hopper where we're doing our reseeding efforts. And this area was also all Phragmites. A little bit further to the east, this is an area that has dried out, but we successfully revegetated it with inland saltgrass, a native grass. And now this area, when it sees water in the spring and fall, is loaded with shorebirds. And then here's just a collage of photos from around Utah Lake, which once upon a time, all of these locations were all Phragmites. And if you stood on the shoreline of Utah Lake, you wouldn't even know the lake was there. And now we're having a huge diversity of vegetation coming back, and we're seeing a lot of pollinator species come back too, which is really exciting. And so the question is, what would things look like if we hadn't done all this work over the past 10 years? And from the beginning, we could see how quick, from the beginning of the presentation, you could see how quickly Phragmites invades. And basically, if it's given more water, it's going to use more water. And much of our wetlands would look like this around Great Salt Lake. And so what do we need to keep this going? We know this is working. We just need to keep it up. But we need water because we know that our treatments are more effective if we have water. And we can also revegetate more effectively if we have water. So we really need to capitalize on those wet periods. So we need continued ongoing funding, which allows us to do these treatments year after year. And then we also need what I'm calling literally a rainy day fund. So when we do have large water years, we can capitalize on those and make a bunch of progress. And then this is also a call to action where we need more upstream Phragmites control. The invasion of Phragmites that took place originally was at the bottom of the watershed, but now Phragmites has been transported into the upper watershed, and that seed source is now making its way back down to the bottom of the watershed. So we have really good best practices for how to control Phragmites. Those are all built into best practice documents that we can share. And so we're really hoping that everyone steps up and starts doing a good job controlling their Phragmites as well. And we're happy to help guide people in that effort. And so in general, we just need continued support, and we just have to keep this up. And I have hopefully plenty of time for questions.
Thanks. Well, it's really nice to see that we're making some progress on one of the issues around here. Keith, I do have one question. You said 180,000 acres of project area. How much of that has Phragmites in it?
Yeah, so we don't have a current accurate estimate, but the estimate from 2012 was 23,000 acres, and then UGS did another estimate in 2014. There's 40,000 acres of Phragmites. We've made a lot of progress, and also Phragmites has expanded in a lot of places. So I think within that 180,000 acre project boundary, we're doing treatments every year with all those partners listed on about 30 to 40,000 acres. And that's probably about where the number sits for how much Phragmites is out there. If our I think that it could be quite a bit lower once we actually map it all, because we've been doing all these treatments.
Something that you pointed out that I caught very interesting was using grazing to reduce the Phragmite population. What are some other grazing animals that could also be an alternative as well, like sheep or any other grazing animals?
Yeah, due to the size of Phragmites, really cattle are the best choice. So it is impenetrably thick and 15 feet tall. And even if you put large cattle in an area like that, they won't make their way into it. You actually have to mow paths to give them access to have them graze it down.
Okay. And what is if you don't mind repeating it, if you already said it, what is the success rate of using grazing as an alternative to pesticides?
Yeah. So grazing will not kill Phragmites. And so we have a lot of areas where we can put cattle on it for 10 plus years and the area looks really good. If you take the cattle off for a growing season, the Phragmites will return to full growth that season. So we had an area where we did that this past season. We had cattle on it for many years and we took them off. And by June, the Phragmites was 10 to 15 feet tall again.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, it's a way to contain it. Yeah.
I'm gonna go to
Your comment about the Phragmites in the upper watershed. I live in Morgan, and I've noticed the last few years all the places around town on private property and on county property where it's popping up, where there's wetlands, where there's, you know, some spring water popping, gurgling out. Is there a concerted effort or starting to be one to get this information out to private property owners and out to municipalities and incentive? And
Yeah, so there's been efforts on that for a long time now, and they've kind of been separate small efforts here and there. And just in probably within the last year, it's starting to get quite a bit more coordinated. And so there's the county weed supervisors that they have some resources in their individual counties to do some control. They've been doing work, but now there's more interest from folks in the conservation districts and NRCS, and hopefully more funding available because we know how much Phragmites impacts water for Great Salt Lake. There's some current research working on refining exactly how much water we can gain for Great Salt Lake by removing Phragmites, but that's the big impetus now for getting more organized in the entire watershed to do those treatments.
A couple of questions for you. First of all, is that deck available on Forestry, Fire, and State Lands website, the deck you just presented?
We have a lot of information on our website. I'm not sure if this most recent form of the presentation is on there.
If I was to send you it.
I think there's a recording of it through the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council. I'm also happy to share it with you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
As far as the map goes, the Phragmites map is fantastic. Do you have any maps that show things like salt cedar or Russian olive in addition to Phragmites?
We do not. No. I think that we would have a lot easier time using remote sensing to map, especially Russian olive stands out so much. We are doing a lot of work with Russian olive and tamarisk, but we do not have a comprehensive map for it.
That'll be next.
Yeah.
And this will be the last question.
Real quick, my name is Rich Hansen. I work for Utah Division of Wildlife with Keith and Chad, and I organize the volunteers for all of our treatments. And Sportsman provide hundreds of hours of volunteer service with us. We've never talked to a group like this. If there's anybody interested to see what we're doing on the ground that want to help out, come hit me up and I'll put you on the list so you can get out with us. It's usually a nice day out in the marsh, right in the Marsh Masters, and I'm getting to see a lot of things that you wouldn't see otherwise.
All right, thanks. And thanks, Keith, everyone. Let's give them a round of applause.